Now I would like to introduce our speaker for the session. Tony Senanayake is a senior manager at IIT Insight, and he leads client management and project management for the portfolio of India-based initiatives, applying data-driven approaches to maximize development impact. Prior to joining IIT Insight, Tony worked as a researcher with the International Growth Center in partnership with Yale University on the design of evolution, looking at the impact of rural electrification in Sierra Leone. Tony has worked on the design of monitoring and evaluation systems for non-profits in India, evaluation of edtech platforms in Zambia, and the design of youth homeless shelters in New Haven. Well, the list goes on and on, so without further ado, let's welcome Mr. Tony Senanayake, everyone.
Good afternoon, and thank you all for taking out some time to listen to me speak today. It's a real pleasure and it's a real honour. So, as we pull up the slides, I'm going to get you to do some work and do some thinking. Because as I understand it, Delhi University students are much better at thinking than I'm going to do. So, given that you are experts in academics, I'd like you to take a moment to think about if you were able to design a program, or what we call an intervention in the development space. What program or intervention would you design that would lead to the greatest amount of increase in school learning in lower middle income countries? So once again, what is a program or an intervention that you would design and implement that would lead to the greatest level of school learning? Okay, let's hear something. Hands if you're willing, otherwise I'm happy to call people as well. Any thoughts? Sir, what would you do? You have to increase school learning. What are you going to do? Any ideas?
Creating a better network.
Build a better?
Network.
A network of?
Between teachers and students and guidance.
Okay, great. Building better information symmetry and networks between teachers and students. Makes sense. Any other ideas? Yes.
Basically, nowadays, people are more focused on academics. But I think for early childhood, there should be lower classes for students because I think it's more important to be focused first and jump into the back. So there should be lower classes.
Fantastic, yeah. There's a lot of work happening in the early childhood development space at the moment. So that's something where a lot of interesting things are happening. One more idea? Infrastructure, yeah. This is always a very cool one. Interestingly, this has been the focus of the international education sector for the last 20-25 years, is building infrastructure, ensuring that students have access to school. So these are some great ideas. Now I want you to go one step further. I want you to think about these interventions and these programs. And I want you to consider which of these may be most cost effective. So think about how much learning we could generate through these programs, building better networks, infrastructure, early childhood development. And let's think about how much it's going to cost. Any guesses of those three options that we provided, which may be the most cost effective? So once again, one option was building better networks between teachers and students. The second was around early childhood development. The third was infrastructure. So I'm going to ask you to raise your hand if you think firstly, networks are going to be the most cost effective. What? Okay. I'm going to guess about 10-15%. The second option was early childhood development. Okay, I'm seeing maybe a third of the class. Sorry, third of the room. Very sorry. And the final one, infrastructure. Okay, so the second and third ones are roughly the same. Now we have literature on this. There's a lot of research that has gone into what is the most cost-effective way to try and improve school learning. So let's have a look at some of the ideas that are quite common. So what we see here are two of the most common answers first on your left is unconditional cash transfers. Giving people money. People know what they want better than anyone else. So surely if we give them money and they value education, they're going to invest in education. What we see here, the numbers are a little bit different. Essentially what it's saying is that for an investment of $100 purchasing power parity adjustment, on average this leads to approximately 0.2 additional years of school. Is that good? Is that bad? I'll tell you the answer in a few minutes. The one to the right of that is a merits-based scholarship. So we identify students who are more likely to be successful, or in other way we want to target. It might be from backgrounds or whatnot. And we see that it's slightly more cost effective on average. Okay. We've added a bar. Free uniforms. Is that something that crossed your mind as being potentially effective? It's not something that crosses my mind. Why is free uniforms going to be a cost-effective way to improve school learning? Any thoughts? Well, one idea is that if students are uncomfortable going to school because they don't have the uniforms, they may not be willing to go to the classroom, they may feel uncomfortable. And so by providing free school uniforms, they're actually more comfortable and enjoy those. I would choose the barrier to entry, as we say. That's just one hypothesis. There's many hypotheses. Okay, now we're getting interesting. This is deworming. So I'm sure many of you know about deworming. Essentially, it's these gastrointestinal worms, which are very easy to treat with these tablets, which cost minimal, less than 100 rupees a day. And one thing we found is that deworming is highly cost effective. So a study that was conducted by Institute of Gene Biology and partners, you may have heard of them, they recently won the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2018. They've done that and along with Michael Kramer as well, I should know. They looked at deworming and they initially looked at deworming as a health initiative. They thought, this is super cost effective. Deworming is a real problem in many low living countries. It can be debilitating. It can reduce nutrition outcomes. But what they found very interestingly is that it actually has amazing effects on education. Almost 20 times more effective than free uniforms. It's deworming. So $100 spent leads to almost 50 additional years of school. This is absurd. It's absurd. If there's one more bar here. What that brings is informing parents about the benefits of education. And so what we've observed in the education space thus far, these things are constantly changing when we're learning more of academics and doing research, is that information asymmetry is one of the largest challenges when it comes to education in more than even more so than deep. $100 investment in informing parents about the benefits of education leads to over 20 additional years of school. Remarkable. And we have in India at the moment many organizations now that are using technology to try and deliver information to parents, particularly in rural and disadvantaged areas, about the benefits of school. So what we have on the slide here is a similar example. And one thing you may know straight away before we even look at the words is that we're observing a similar distribution. What do we call this distribution? Approximately. You all know the answer to this. What is this distribution about? Exponential function? Log function? Right? Something along those lines? Yeah. Somewhat similar to what we saw before. In this case, what we're looking at is the effectiveness of interventions which focus on water. On the x-axis, we have a variety of interventions. Piped water, household chlorination, all the way up to adding zinc into our rehydration programs. And on the y-axis, we have the additional years of healthy life for $1,000 of purchasing power packages. And we don't need to go into the details. But what I want to focus on here is that these exponential functions show up time and time again when we look at the effectiveness of various programs in different spaces. There are these interventions which are so much more cost effective. For the same investment of dollars, we have the opportunity to drive exponentially more benefit for people. This is, as far as we've seen, an empirical fact. There are so many of these examples where we've seen outlying opportunities. And this is exciting. It is exciting that there are opportunities which are exponentially better than many of the standard interventions. And often, the interventions which you see on the right-hand side are not the ones that you assume. Who's going to assume that adding zinc to oral rehydration programs is going to be the most cost-effective? Maybe some experts on me. Who's going to assume that deworming is going to be one of the most cost-effective ways to increase indignation? Maybe some of you, not me. So often the answer is non-intuitive. So one final graph here. Now this is similar. So this distribution is a little bit more like a alpha distribution. And what this is showing on the slide at the moment are interventions in the disease control space. On the x-axis, we have something called DALYs, D-A-L-Y, and DALYs stand for Disability Adjusted Life Years. It's a measure that's often used in the health space to try and determine which interventions are more effective. So how many additional disability adjusted life years are gained by people who are recipients of the program. This is something. On the y-axis, we have the number of interventions. This is a cumulative distribution. And one thing I want to highlight is that the vast majority of interventions are sitting here near the origin. The vast majority of interventions have minimal impact. Some impact, but minimal impact. Yet, there's an intervention out here, and an intervention out here, that is highly cost effective. So as I was mentioning before, we see this fact coming up time and time again. There are these outlier possibilities that exist in the world from what we're seeing. There are these opportunities where we can do so much more good, have so much more impact than the vast majority of opportunities. And so that's why I'm really excited to talk to you today as we try and think about how can you use your careers, your time, your privileges, and the amazing opportunities that you have for the rest of your life. Try and do that together. To try and make this outsized impact in the world. That's a really exciting thing to think about. Is how can you be on that right-hand side and really just drive the amazing. I'm not going to have all the answers for you today, but what I'd like to do is share with you some of the ways we can think about finding these opportunities. I'll tell you a little bit about the work that I do, which is in the global development space. And I'll also introduce some of the areas which some of my colleagues and members of the Effective Altruism UDSC are investigating where we think that there are these outside opportunities. So what we've seen so far is that many of these opportunities are seeing this exponential function or a power law distribution in the aim of the various opportunities. So what does this mean? There's a lot of interventions. If we think about education, we could sit down here and maybe you'll be a little bit more chatty and give me some more answers, but we could probably come up with 1,000 different things on how to try and improve education. We're not lacking for ideas. The ideas exist. Brilliant minds like yourselves have so many ideas. But there are a small number of these ideas that seem to have an outsized impact. seem to have the aim to drive so much more quote unquote food and carbon opportunities. And when we then think about opportunity cost, it means that choosing an inefficient outcome has a large opportunity cost. So these is in terms of economics. We might have some economists in the room, but essentially when we think about opportunity cost is if I use my time or use my resources speaking to you today, my opportunity cost is the next best alternative at how I could use my time and resources. And maybe I would have been sitting on my couch watching TV, which means my opportunity cost is really low. Alternatively, I might be able to be at a meeting with a government official, in which case maybe my opportunity cost is very high. So what we think about in economics is the cost of something is not the amount of money you spend, or what you pay, or what you give up. We like to think about things in terms of their opportunities and try and make decisions based on their opportunity cost. So as we think about these interactions, if you're spending time, say, on free uniforms, trying for an education, the opportunity cost of free uniforms and that money might be doing zero. Because the opportunity cost is really high. Right? And so as we think about not just develop, but a lot of ways to do good in the world, if we do the inefficient thing, like the wrong thing, inefficient thing, then our opportunity cost will be really, really high. So we have not only this great opportunity to do a lot of good in the world, but if we decide not to be efficient, then we're giving up a lot of opportunities. So it's something we should spend a lot of time thinking about. And I think I've now said this in 3 or 4 ways, but just so it's in the screen. By being strategic, by being careful, we can have an outside impact. So I'm really excited for you taking some time today to engage, hopefully in a discussion about some of these ideas as you're thinking about how can you have an outside impact. So I'm not sure if you can see it, but each one of these right here, each little pixel is 1 hour of your professional time. In our careers, we're going to work something like 80,000 hours. 40 years of our life, let's just say 25 to 65. 2,000 hours a year. And honestly, we're probably going to work a little bit more than that. I know I tend to. But even with those conservative assumptions, it's 80,000 hours. It's a lot of hours. It's a lot of hours. It's a lot of opportunity. So thinking about how you're going to use your 80,000 hours is worth the investment of a few of those small dots in the top. In the scheme of things, most people don't spend all that much time thinking deeply about their careers, or also how to do the most impact. I know I didn't make much of it. But if we think about those 80,000 hours and the return on investment, if we think strategically about how we can have an outside impact, you can do a lot of good, as I've shown you. Opportunities exist. So let me talk to you about some of these opportunities, and I'm going to do it within this framework of something called effective altruism. So effective altruism is this growing social movement, I'll explain it a little bit more, that's really trying to make the world as good a place as we seek to use data, evidence, and reason to try and identify these opportunities, figure out how we do them. And we actually try. In the end, and I'll speak to you about some of the ways that I'm on the team just trying. Does that mean that we're going to be doing the most work? Almost certainly not. But we're trying. So effective altruism has a few sort of components. Some people like to say, so what does effective altruism think about this? What do effective altruism do? I just want to explain what this effective altruism UDSC. Sort of, I like to describe it as at its core, it's a philosophy. And I've just described it. Essentially, it's trying to do as much good as possible using data, evidence, and reason, and actually do it, actually try. So that's the philosophy. Underneath that, we have the social movement. We have a lot of people who are thinking about how to actually drive that, how to actually identify these opportunities, how to collect the data, look at the evidence, and undertake the reasoning, and actually do it your own. That's the social movement. And as the social movement is thinking about these questions, trying to figure out what the answers are, they are identifying cause priority areas. That's why there's a bunch of problems. These cause priority areas are different ways that members of the movement think that they can actually have an outsized impact. It's a hypothesis. It's not the answer. So as I share some of these cause priority areas today, I just want to make it clear that we don't have the answers. It's a movement of people who are trying to ask the questions and identify these opportunities. But it's a group of people who are also skeptical. Generally, we'll seek to follow where the data and evidence goes, as opposed to anecdote and intuition. So I'll share some of the things that members of the group and members of the group think are highly effective. You should be skeptical. You should be skeptical. So, what is the framework that effective altruism use to try and identify these opportunities? And it's what you see on the screen. There's three real keys, three real characteristics we look at in an opportunity. It's scale, its level of neglectedness, and its tractability. SNT, scale, neglectedness, tractability. And this actually is a really good framework that you can use often in your own life as you're trying to prioritize between opportunities that you have. What's the scale? How big is it? How much impact will it have? How many people or animals' lives may be influenced or impacted? Of those lives, to what level do they be? So are we talking about a small improvement in many lives or a big improvement in a few lives? Scale. Neglectedness. Neglectedness makes us think about how many people are already trying to solve this problem. Because if we have a lot of smart, passionate people already trying to solve the problem, then maybe it may not be the best place that you usually invest your time. You may want to invest your time in areas that are a little bit more neglected. Because that's what I was talking about before, the opportunity comes. You may be able to have that outside. That's neglectedness. And tractability. Tractability essentially means with your skills and resources, how likely is it that you can actually move it? Make a change. Tractability. Scale, neglectedness, tractability. A really helpful framework in your everyday life. And a framework that we'll use within effective altruism to try and identify opportunities. One other sort of key concept to think about is called scope insensitivity. So what is scope insensitivity? Essentially, when we're thinking about doing good, most people, we think up here. Ourselves, our family, our communities. There's people who are close to us. But in effective altruism, while we agree that it's important to look up at that, we're also trying to think about the full scope, the ability to drive good outside of just yourself and family. Which means thinking about all humans that may be living in the world. So I come from Australia. As you may be able to tell by the accent, hopefully you can understand what I'm saying. Many people in Australia, I was just there last week, very generous, very charitable. but are focused on improving student. When we think about scope and sensitivity, what we're trying to say is don't just focus on contribution. A life in India is the same as a life in Australia. It's the same as a life in Ethiopia, where I've been next week. A life is a life is a life. Scope and sensitivity. And so if you have an opportunity to improve 10 lives in India, with the amount of time or giving that you have, and with those same resources, you can only improve one life in Australia, and just on the basis of maths, it's a good idea. You should spend those resources. Now we can go even bigger with this. How about non-human, sentient beings? Now there's a lot of research happening now that shows that most animals feel pain. Most animals feel pleasure. We can have a long discussion then about what is the difference between a sentient human and a sentient animal. But there is a good argument that many people make that we shouldn't discriminate. And if we have the opportunity to improve the lives of thousands of sentient animals, that's an amazing opportunity. We should take that opportunity. And we can go even one step further. How about people in the future? How about animals in the future? Philosophically, fundamentally, what's different about them? These are beings that will feel pain and feel pleasure. Some of these might be your own children, and grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. And do their lives count any less than the lives right now? Many people argue no. Now, so this is a core concept of the effective altruism, is scope and sensitivity. And the thing is, many of the opportunities right here, we're already maximizing. We're already looking after ourselves. Many of us are trying to do the best, looking after our families, and many are trying to look after their communities. There's so much untapped potential out here, which would be incredibly cost effective. Great opportunities. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk about a couple of the active course priority areas. What do people do? So as I said before, I work in the global poverty alleviation space. I work for an organisation called ID Insight in the top right hand side. The organisation's mission is to use data and evidence to help leaders alleviate poverty worldwide. So I've worked on projects in many countries. I'll talk to you about a couple of projects now. So one project is Educate Girls. So you click a couple of times. Right. So Educate Girls, you may have heard of already. What they're trying to do is get out of school girls in India into school. In the past, what they did is they used frontline workers, people who actually go into the communities, find these girls, help them get enrolled into school. What our team has done is developed an AI algorithm using publicly available information, such as census data, NHS data, and whatnot. Combine that with private information that Educate Girls collect by going from door to door, and then trying to identify communities which are more likely to have a greater number of out-of-school girls. So essentially, the frontline workers will go to those communities, identify more girls with the same resources. And we estimate that using this algorithm in the past 5 years, the organisation has been able to identify over 600,000 more out-of-school girls. And if they just went using it. So it's a huge opportunity just using direct evidence, information that's often publicly available, and the resources that are available. Some of you may have heard about BRAC. BRAC is actually the largest NGO in the world based in Bangladesh. And we work with their health, nutrition, and population program, which is a program that delivers pre and postnatal services to over 18 million women in Bangladesh. They are now collecting data using a technological system instead of an educator. And what we did is we developed a back-end ETL system which displays real-time information on a dashboard. The dashboard is using Power BI. the back-end system is using Microsoft Azure. You might guess Microsoft project, hence we use Microsoft products. And we now have perhaps 3,000 leaders able to access real-time data on over 80 million metrics. This used to be done by pen and paper. You can just imagine all the data quality issues that would come from pen and paper. Now it's all done electronically. We can do data quality assurance in real time. And the hope is that in the future, we can use predictive algorithms to try and optimize delivery of services. So using the same resources, protecting the Now I'll quickly describe the third and final project that I've been involved with NIPIO. NIPIO is developing an outcome-based financing project. Outcome-based financing means that you pay service providers based on outcomes rather than inputs. Now, most projects are based on inputs. If the Indian government wants to develop a road or a bridge, they run a tender, an RFP. Some designers, architects, and builders go, here we go, this is how much it's going to cost. The government pays them up front. And then, who knows what the results will be? How can they be kept accountable? There are ways to try and keep them accountable, but it's often very difficult. The idea with outcome-based financing is that you pay on the basis of the results. Did the road get built according to specification? Is it flat? Is the tolls separate? So what our team has been involved with is designing one of these programs, but looking at education technology in 10 of the aspiration districts in Rajasthan and UP. So we have to figure out how are we going to measure learning outcomes for students in these schools? What targets are we going to set so that it's challenging, but not too challenging? That's the project. I'm going to touch on a couple more areas, most priority areas. One area is animal suffering. There are a lot of organizations that are focused on how to improve the lives of animals. This is some of them here. An area which many of you might be interested in is artificial intelligence alignment. Now, this is an area that many of you will probably know much more than me. But there's an existential risk that many people believe that artificial intelligence might not be aligned with the values, morals, best outcomes for humans. And that we don't know how to design artificial intelligence in order to align the goals of the algorithm with the goals of us, humans. And so a lot of organizations are now focused on figuring out how to set up systems to align the two, to minimize this risk. A lot of money, a lot of effort is going into this. I'm not an expert, but I'd be happy to link you to experts if you're interested. And final area that I'll focus on is what we call global catastrophic risk. There are many risks like pandemic preparedness, one thing that we now know a lot about, which are unproven risks, many existential risks. Many of these organizations here are trying to identify what these risks are and figure out ways to deal with them. Now, as I said before, we don't have all the answers. There are many people, many organizations trying to figure out what these opportunities are. And this is just some of them. Some that I'm really interested in include mental health research. There's a lot of work going into identifying ways to improve it. Food security, which is a particular problem at the moment given all the supply chain issues that we're seeing around the world. And also, happiness and well-being research. So at the moment, in economics, we usually focus on GDP growth. But what we're identifying is that perhaps we should be focusing on well-being, happiness, dignity. How do we measure those things? Which programs might not lead to the biggest increase in economic outcomes, but they may actually be really effective in increasing happiness. There's a lot of work. So, I've talked to you a lot. I really appreciate you listening so far. So what can you do? You can use 80,000 hours. You can use all of the opportunities and privileges of being at an amazing institute at Delhi University and try and use your career to do as much good as possible. If that's something you're interested in doing, it's incredibly exciting. It's incredibly fulfilling. I would recommend looking at a place called 80,000hours.org in our recent post on that. They have a lot of information on how you can think about this. You can give money. And there's a lot of organisations that help identify and give information on the giving opportunities that are most available. One of them is a building equipment. But what I would recommend is learn. Ask questions. Try and find your own answers. You're at the start of incredible journeys in your careers, and I look forward to learning from so many of you in the future. Now is the time to ask the questions and try and learn. Here are a couple of books that I would recommend that I've read, which I found incredibly well. Core Economics is a fantastic book if you're interested in development economics, the type of work that I'm doing. Doing Good Better is a book that describes everything I've tried to say today, much better than I ever felt. The Precipice is focused on opportunities to do good for the long term. It talks a lot about artificial intelligence alignment, pandemic preparedness, climate, bioterrorism, so on and so forth. And finally, one of the seminal books written by an Australian philosopher called Senanayake is a book called The Life People Say. That talks a little bit more about the philosophy, the consequentialist philosophy that sits at the basis of the life. So with that, I'll say thank you for spending one of these dots with me today and providing your attention. But I'll just say, what an exciting time to be thinking about these days. The rest of these dots is the rest of the world. So I'm happy to take any questions and I appreciate your attendance.